Hi, I'm Stephen Tronichek from HorrOrigins.com, and HorrOrigins.com is a place where you can find horror reviews, interviews, and articles. HorrorOrigins also runs a film festival where you can submit feature films, short scripts, feature scripts, just a bunch of great horror content there. Today, I'm talking with Dylan Clark, who is a young horror filmmaker who has made some really impressive work through his YouTube channel. Just really impressive short horror films that remind me a lot of David F. Sandberg's short horror films that you find on his YouTube, and it's just really cool stuff. Honestly, you really got a wonderful aesthetic going down, and it's really effective. It's really effective.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. So I like to start out these interviews with a single question about, where you got into this. What was the bite? What brought you in? Because horror is so diverse. You can come at it at so many different angles. There's so many different genres. What brought you here?
It's funny because I remember I was trying to think back to like what was the inciting moment that I got into the genre. And I realized that it was, I don't remember how many years ago, but many years ago when I was little, I was watching the Oscars with my parents, and they showed like the briefest clip from The Exorcist. And it scared me so bad that I remember telling them, I was like, who in the right mind would possibly enjoy watching a horror film? Like, that seems sadistic, much less making one. But right. And I just remember going to bed and having that image like seared into my brain. And I was like, well, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced. But it just stuck with me for so long that eventually that horror turned into like a morbid curiosity. Right. And so slowly I was kind of like, oh, maybe I want to see more of that kind of thing, which sounds weird to say, but eventually I dipped my toes into something a little less scary, but still horror, which is Poltergeist.
They're here.
So that was my first horror movie. And I just have family members who are into horror films, so that helped get me into it. And then, short horror films also led into that a little bit. That was something I didn't realize was were so accessible and so prolific online. And I don't know, as you said, it's just such a broad world that horror, holds. So there's just so much to dip your toes into.
What clip was it from The Exorcist?
Yeah, it's one of those things where like it was so traumatizing that I almost don't remember what the exact image was, because now that I've seen The Exorcist, it could have been many. But I think it was either her throwing up, because I had heard about The Exorcist before this, but I hadn't seen anything from it. It was either her throwing up.
What is it?
Or her, like the end of her head turn, the animatronic head turn. So one of those.
Yeah, that movie's awesome. I love that horror movie. Yeah,
insane.
Right.
Yeah,
and they're just doing so much crazy stuff with how the characters relate to religion, and how it really, it's just wonderful would be the wrong word, but
I was listening to something yesterday, and they were saying The Exorcist it's almost unfair how much it tackles as far as like religious horror, because it just doesn't leave anything left over for filmmakers to explore, which I thought was kind of funny, because it does so much. Yeah.
I'm interested in, you mentioned morbid curiosity, and I agree with you there. I think that most of us get into this because there's like something weirdly exciting and fun about watching all this creepy shit going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I watched your shorts, and it reminds me a lot of course, the work of David F. Sandberg, who went on to make Lights Out and Shazam. And I was just wondering what makes you gravitate now, at least, towards those short horror stories, other than I don't have the money to do it otherwise.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely an element. That was definitely a big part of getting into it, because The very first short films I was making when I was really little were superhero films. And I was like, oh yeah, we can totally do this. Made like a stunt dummy, threw it out the window and recorded it. And we're like, oh yeah, it's a guy flying. But then, you start to realize this is actually horrible. And it takes a lot to make a good movie, much less a good superhero film. Mm-hmm. So eventually I was like, oh, well, what can I make that's convincing? What can I pull off? And so, not that this is the answer you wanted, but lack of money, lack of resources led me to that. But at the same time, I think it's knowing that you could make a short film, something as short as some like Lights Out, and still get a similar effect to that Exorcist image, where it's like you can have something so short, but have something that lingers for so long. Just kind of like that power of horror, not to be like, I don't know, dramatic, but I think it packs a punch like in a very short amount of time. So not only is there the economical side of doing short horror films, but there's also, it doesn't feel like it's sacrificing an emotional punch that I think some other genres of short films have to work a lot harder to get and sometimes can't get. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about how horror is a lot like comedy, in which, you have a setup, you have a punchline. Yeah, and exactly. It really, especially whenever you're writing short horror and writing even feature horror, it does make things a little easier. I mean, there's a structure you can kind of go around there. Yeah. So, the ideas are creative and they're really, really fun films to watch. But there seem to be some wonderful influences that you have. Of course, I picked up maybe a little bit of A Quiet Place, maybe a little bit of those Sandberg short films. Brandon Cronenberg, definitely with Transfigure. That thumbnail looks like looks exactly like the poster for Possessor, which I love. I love David Cronenberg's work. That he's a big influence. But how do you, how does your creative process relate to those influences?
Well, so I honestly had not seen Possessor when I made Transfigure, but it was that thumbnail was directly inspired because I had seen the poster and the trailer, and it looked wonderful. And I have since seen the film, and it is wonderful. But
you sure wonderful is the right word for that?
Yeah, no, not the right word. Not the right word for most of this stuff, but it's riveting, I should say, I suppose. I quite enjoyed it. Maybe that's something that's wrong with me, but anyways. So Brandon Cronenberg, I guess like his style and some other filmmakers' style are influences for me. Like I'm a big fan of Oz Perkins. Oh, yeah. I just.
Gretel and Hansel was awesome, man.
There was some divisive reactions to that film, but I loved it. I went to go see it alone because no one would go see it with me, and it was great.
Witch in the basement, oh my god.
Yeah, so I don't know that those are stories that I find influential or influences to me, but just the way that they're told. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd ever make a film like Possessor. It's a little hardcore for me, but the style and the way it's told is just. It's extremely influential. Mm-hmm. And I think on the other hand, films like A Quiet Place and David Sandberg's films, that kind of it's a sandbox for a horror filmmaker. They create their rules or set up their sandbox, and then they just get to have fun in it. A Quiet Place actually feels just like so many short films to me. Not the experience, but the premise is just like. I'm actually surprised it wasn't a short film before. Because, if you just type in the word "don't" short horror film on YouTube, you get all these dozens of films saying don't peek, don't stare, don't look, don't XYZ, and don't make a noise would fit right in. So A Quiet Place feels primed for the short horror film kind of setup. And that's what I think I really like about David F. Sandberg's films too. They set up this, it's like a world through a rule, and then they just get to set up a scare through that or explore what that would look like. It's just a lot of fun, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do as well. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I've always enjoyed working in horror because of what you just said, which is you set up a world through a rule. You can kind of, you can break the boundaries of reality as much as you like, as long as you follow the rules.
Yeah.
And I've always found that really entertaining and fun.
Yeah, me too. And you can break the rules sometimes as long as it doesn't feel cheap. So
right.
Yeah.
So I love stories from low budget sets. Being a low budget set, tourist or so, I love stories from low budget sets. What's the best story you can think of from one of your films?
So there's a number of things that have happened or things we've had to do to accomplish a shot that are just absurd, but they're not necessarily, they're probably way funnier to us having been there. But one that I find funny in retrospect is when we were filming a short called The Pretty Thing, which was, it's been fairly popular online, but it's so old and it makes me cringe now. But anyways, that short, we made a mask for it. And we were filming that alone. It was just 3 of us in this creepy like farmhouse in Rhode Island. So it was like primed for a horror film on its own. And we were all so freaked out filming it that I guess our actresses' pupils dilated, which is like a thing that happens when you're super scared, supposedly. And so I've gotten all these comments that are they think that the actress is either like the best actress they've ever seen because she looks like truly horrified, or she's just like high the whole film. And I don't know, that's just something I found funny because it was so scary to film it and I didn't think anything would come of it. But I guess people think she looks convincingly horrified because, her eyes dilated. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I love all those little happy accidents that happen. So something that really pops out in your work is sound effects and music. You see a lot of short horror films. You see a lot of short films made for no budget. And the thing that's like kind of a little bit lacking in most of them is sound effects and music. But a lot throughout your work, it's always really impressive.
Thank you.
And really quite good. How do you approach the music and the sound work on your films?
For music, I usually planning out the film have some musical cues in mind, which I'm sure is like normal for filmmakers planning anything. But then when I'm editing, I use a temp soundtrack, which I know is also pretty common. And for that, I just go for films that have a similar vibe. Like for Transfigure, the more recent one, it was It Follows, music from It Follows, because it's so like synthy and techno. And I figured if it's a computer, which is the antagonist basically in the film, that would fit. And then for home movies, it was a track from Sinister because of the home movie angle. So both of those ended up fitting really well. And then I sent that out to a composer who I've been working with online, and he just goes with it. And then we kind of communicate about what's working, what's not. So that process has been pretty good. And I think that's similar to how it's actually done. I'm not entirely sure, but
yeah, it sounds pretty close. I've always found that once you get to like another level, another rung in filmmaking, it's like, oh, I've just been doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
I thought this was special.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you find it's like way more complicated than you
ever thought. Right.
So who knows? But for sound effects, otherwise, I appreciate that you think that it sounds good. I've been trying to kind of mask the fact that I don't have the proper equipment to get the audio I want to get. So that's something I'm hoping to invest in the future. But yeah, I don't really know what to say about that, honestly. I've just been trying to make sure the lack of dialogue really masks the fact that my audio equipment isn't actually that good. And then just really, accentuating the small sounds, I think helps bring out, like a creaking chair or the creaking floorboards, just really helps tie everything together.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That is the thing that I think pops out so much. It's those accentuations of those little things that it works really well. It works really well.
Thank you.
So VFX work too, really impressive. Especially that severed head is really cool. I was watching the making of that one and I was like, oh wow. Because you
Yeah.
know, a lot of people who get into directing and get into a lot of that work, they don't really pay so much attention to like all the after effects and all that
Yeah.
work that really has to go into that. So I just wanted to ask about, explaining just how you tend to implement VFX on set, or even specifically with the severed head, like just kind of break down your process to getting to it.
Yeah, my VFX experience has kind of like has recently increased significantly because well, I didn't have access to the Adobe suite until now that I'm in film school, I do. So that's been quite helpful. But with recent films, I've like for home movies, I tried to do an effect at the end, which was just the character like rises up. And so that was kind of my first like dabbling in After Effects. And it's my experience has basically been that with each film, I've managed to learn exactly what I need to learn for the next film to work, which has been pretty lucky, honestly. But at the same time, hopefully that has to do with planning. But for Transfigure and the head decapitation effect, that was one that I knew I'd have to learn a lot of new stuff to make that possibly work. So just making sure that you get every possible version of the shot, like a bunch of different plates and a bunch of different takes of every plate that you will use in the effects composition, has been like my fail-safe way of doing these, because I know I'm going to miss something and regret it. So for that shot, we just my sister, who's the actress in that, we had her fall so many different ways, so many different times, in the shade, in the sunlight, like, oh, if it's in the sunlight, is there going to be reflections on the blood that we can't get, glistens on the blood that we couldn't get. Okay. So we had to do it in the shade. And so it's just stuff like that. We're pre-planning as much as you can. For VFX is really important, and for sound. I know a lot of my friends who are really into sound get really frustrated when filmmakers don't take sound into consideration. So I'm sure it's the same for VFX. But yeah, so we just shot her falling, and then I had a decapitated head prop. Saying that casually sounds weird, but it was for another film, and I took the stump from that and like mimicked her motion, so I filmed that as well, and then put it on top. And then just making sure you have some practical or makeup or something physical there to help tie it all together, I think is really helpful. So we had, she painted on just like with wax, kind of a seam, and then some blood that was actually there to help tie it all together. So I think that's also helpful. But yeah. It's complicated.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, you hear so many filmmakers say, shoot this as many times as you possibly can, and get something physical on set for the actors to react to.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to do it. And I mean, I found that works out really well, and the effect looks quite good, honestly. It looks really good.
I was very nervous about it, but I appreciate it. I'm glad it kind of worked out.
So do you have any larger or longer projects coming up?
At the moment, the biggest thing I have coming up is my thesis film for school, which I don't know exactly how big it will be, but I know the idea that I'm planning to go with would be a much larger production than what I'm used to doing. It's still a short film, but the scope of it is a little bit bigger. Otherwise, I've been trying to work on writing feature films, which is a whole nother beast. And yeah, and I wrote out a feature version of one of the short films I had done, but again, I'm not super experienced at it, so I need to go back and revise, write a lot more, and then figure that all out. But at the moment, yeah, just keep making short films and see where that takes me, and work on other people's projects. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's as good as most of us can do at the moment, just keep working on our little things and keep supporting each other and trying to figure out, how do we keep making movies? That's kind of it.
Yeah.
So I like to end these things off by asking if you could recommend one horror movie to the audience, what was it going to be? So one horror movie, top of your head, best thing you can recommend to everybody.
So I actually watched yesterday. I finally got around to watching Saint Maud, which was a
Oh
film
my God.
I've been meaning to see for so long. It's just one of those films that kind of got lost in the pandemic for me. Like I was anticipating it. Finally saw it yesterday. Lived up to my hype, luckily.
So great. It's so incredible.
And yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but it stuck the landing big time for me in a way that, like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so not really a pleasant experience, definitely not, but it's gonna stick with me. So that's definitely something I'd recommend to anyone who thinks they'd be interested in that. Yeah.
You know, I'm really, really impressed with that film and how it uses sound and like everything like that, because the motif of that click click lighter going through the first act and into the second one, like that's awesome.
Yeah, it demands a rewatch, so hopefully I'll get around to that. That was great.
Yeah, I like that one a lot too. All right, that seems like we're wrapping it up here. So again, I'm Stephen Tronichek from HorrorOrigins.com, where you can find all this stuff at HorrorOrigins.com or HorrorOrigins, the YouTube channel. You know, you just go to YouTube and type in HorrorOrigins. You can find me at STRONICEK on Twitter. And where can we find you, Dylan?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, which is just Dylan Clark. Should be one of the ones that pops up first.
All righty. Excellent. All right. Well, it was great talking to you. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, you too. Of course. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely.